Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I as a consumer are going to want to buy.
The country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Welcome to another edition of For the Record. Our topic today is going to be education, public and private. We're talking about students in school, and with us is Ashely DeMauro from Students First. Let's talk about your organization.
Sure. So Students First is a national organization headquartered in California, active in 17 states, including the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Our goals are to improve the public educational system and defend the interests of school children and put them first when it comes to public education.
Now, how was the organization started?
Sure. So we were founded by Michelle Rhee, who's the former chancellor of the DC Public Schools. When she finished her tenure there, she wasn't done in public education, and she decided that we would need to launch an organization aimed at creating a national movement if we were to ever make a deep impact nationwide.
Now, your primary responsibilities are here in the Commonwealth?
Correct. So I'm the Pennsylvania State Director, and so I handle all of our organization's activities here in Pennsylvania.
And what do those duties entail?
Sure. So as an organization, we seek to implement our changes through three major categories. One is obviously working with our elected officials in Harrisburg and even local school districts to help implement these changes, those people who are capable of implementing these policies. Number two, we have a huge grassroots movement, and that's really what we want to build in order to sustain our movement long term. So we have about 2 million members nationwide, 90,000 of those here in the Commonwealth. So we want to tap into their voice and get them involved in the process. And then thirdly, we support candidates in elections who are pro-reform and will work in the interest of students.
Let's start with the members first. Is that generally parents that are involved with their kids?
Sure. So we want buy-in from people from all walks of life. So when you look at our membership, you'll see parents, you'll see students themselves, you'll see educators who want to improve public schools, you'll see business members who have a stake in an educated workforce, just taxpayers, concerned citizens. We are committed to building this movement and want to get the input of everybody.
We said the magic word there. When it, you know, we fund our schools with taxpayer dollars, and that's one of the first areas that needs to be addressed, probably, I would think, across the board, especially here in the Commonwealth. And how do those taxpayers, what are they angry with their money, the money we're spending?
No, I don't think they're angry with the money that they're spending. I mean, I think that they think that it's a good investment. Obviously, to invest in the education of our students is a wise investment. I think where we need to do a little bit better is ensuring the transparency of the money, and some of our policies speak to that. We'll get into that a little bit later, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So some of our policies speak to wise investments and governance structures. So I don't think taxpayers are upset about the amount of money necessarily. I think they just want to ensure that it's being spent in ways that greatly impact kids.
Well, a lot of people think that if you just throw more money at a situation, you get a better return. Is that accurate?
No, I don't think that's accurate. I absolutely think you need to have money in order to educate students. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I think that there are policies that you can put in place and governance structures that you can put in place that make much more of an impact than just dollars. I think we need to get away from the mindset that a dollar, more public dollars automatically equals quality when it comes to education. I think we need to focus more on accountability than just solely on money.
That's one of the things that a lot of teachers, and not all teachers, but a lot of people paint teachers with a broad brush. How popular is your organization with teachers' unions?
Well, I think what's really interesting, so we talk a lot about unions, but then we also talk a lot about grassroots teachers at the local level who have a big stake in educating students. And our organization, one of our policy pillars is actually elevating the teaching profession. So a lot of our policies are aimed at treating teachers like the professionals that they are, rewarding them, retaining the great teachers, the effective ones. And so I think the more that we can find educators who agree with that mission and want to help us formulate our policies, which is something we've done over the past 2 years, I think the better off we'll be. I don't think that we need to be at odds with teachers, unions, or organizations. I think that we have a lot of the same end goals in mind. It's just a matter of finding out where we agree.
Well, I think a lot of teachers, they take great pride in educating their students.
Absolutely.
Now, changing the way that they are paid is one of the things you've talked about, sort of an incentive plan. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Sure. So one of our policies when it comes to elevating the teaching profession is to seek policies around performance pay or professional pay, merit pay. All of those terms are somewhat interchangeable in the education reform movement. I mean, if you think about it, you want to reward your most effective teachers. And at the local level, as an administrator, you want to build the most effective workforce that you can possibly have. And if you look at any other, business, maybe any other industry, you may have the opportunity to reward those teachers, to keep them, to make it more competitive so that they don't leave. We don't really have that opportunity when it comes to education because of our current salary structures, current contracts. So I think something that we would like to see is the ability to have the locals actually implement some performance pay where teachers who are effective and who are having great impacts on their students are rewarded for that effectiveness.
And have you targeted a specific school district in the Commonwealth that you might want to try that as a target program, or is this something that needs to be done in Harrisburg across the board?
Well, you know what? So in state statute, what we have is that the locals determine their salary schedules, but we don't require it at the state level that locals take into account teacher effectiveness when they're developing this. So that's rarely the case. Usually it's length of service, credentials, master salary bumps, things of that nature. We don't want to, say that that's not worthwhile and meaningful, but we want to value the impact on students first and foremost.
Sure. And talking about where we rank right now in terms of our education with our kids.
Sure. So something that our organization recently put out is what we're calling the State Policy Report Card, or SPRC for short. As an organization that has these 37 policies in our national agenda that we're working for across the nation, we thought that it was time, 2 years in, for us to just look at states and see how they measure up against our policy agenda. So what we decided to do was develop a rubric that measured these states up against our policy agenda so that we can really see where states are and how they're creating a student-centric educational system. So we looked at all 50 states plus DC. We ranked them, we looked at policies, we looked at regulations, we looked at implementation to see what states are doing. And Pennsylvania ranks 19th among all of the states plus DC with a score of a D+. But I do want to talk a little bit about why that shouldn't be viewed so negatively.
That's a good place for us to stop. You're watching For the Record. We're talking about education. Back with more after this on WHVL. Welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing education today with Ashely DeMauro from Students First. When we left off, you said we were at a D+ in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but room for improvement. Let's talk about where we need to improve.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about our policy agenda overall and how we broke this out. So we have 37 policy points in our national policy agenda that fit nicely into what we call policy pillars. We have 3 policy pillars. One is focused on elevating the teaching profession, where we talk about rewarding, retaining, and identifying our most effective educators. The second one is empowering parents with meaningful data, information, and options. It's a little bit self-explanatory. And then the third one is spending wisely and governing well. And that's where we talk about that effective use of taxpayer dollars to make the most impact on students. So we decided to look at all of these policies and measure states up against them and see where we can improve. So this is the first year we're doing it. We plan to do it annually. And so this is the benchmark year. So Pennsylvania does have a lot of room for improvement, but I'll tell you why I feel so hopeful.
Please.
So in this past year, in 2012, Pennsylvania took great strides to enact a lot of meaningful policies, 4 in particular. One was enacting sweeping changes to our educator evaluation system in the Commonwealth. Previously, that statute hadn't been touched in 40 years and didn't really take into account an educator's impact on students. So now, with this new evaluation system, which is one of our anchor policies as an organization, we will be able to identify effective teachers based on their impact on students, which is so important. So that's one huge thing we did this year. Second, we did an expansion to the wildly successful Educational Improvement Tax Credit program that's been at work in the Commonwealth over 10 years, providing students with some scholarship dollars to attend a school of their choice. And we also created a new program this year called the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit Program. It's mimicked after the original EITC, but it's aimed at lower income students who are trapped in failing schools, giving them an option when they might not otherwise have one. So that was an important program. And then last but not least, we also enacted a school district financial recovery statute aimed at increasing the transparency around school district spending, and also getting new governance structures in place when school districts are struggling financially. So first, you have to identify which ones are struggling, which ones are failing to keep their books in order, and then also helping them out, getting some new governance structures in place.
Now let's start with the students first. The opportunity for students that are in failing schools to go to another school. Is it another public school, another private school? Do the people have the options?
Yeah, it's either. So it's actually a tax credit program. So we didn't enact it through a voucher system in Pennsylvania.
That's my next question.
Absolutely. So it wasn't on a voucher system that we did this Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. So what happens is businesses will donate dollars to what we call scholarship organizations at work throughout the Commonwealth in return for tax credits. So that's the business side.
Sure.
We get the business community involved in education a lot in Pennsylvania, and that's one way that they can do that. And then on the scholarship side, students are then able to apply to these scholarship organizations for dollars that they can then take to another public school or a private school if they so choose. Now, the statute specifies that it's students who meet certain income thresholds that are trapped in the bottom 15% of schools in the state. So the Department of Education will put that list out every year so students know who's eligible.
Now, the students then can pick any school, so they can go. Now, how are they transported to that next school?
Well, they can pick schools that have agreed to accept Opportunity Scholarship students. So, and many schools do. You know, they are looking for more funds, and they have better educational opportunities for those students. So it's kind of a win-win for some of these schools that agree to take these students. And so transportation is provided by the local resident school for those students.
Okay, we mentioned the word vouchers first. That's one thing that the Commonwealth does not have any in place, and I believe some people have talked that might be unconstitutional, correct, in our Commonwealth with the voucher plan?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I won't get into the constitutionality issue. I mean, we've heard both sides, both arguments. It's a fight that happened over the past 2 years in Pennsylvania. There were a lot of debates over it in our state legislature. Ultimately, that's why we ended up with a tax credit opportunity scholarship instead of a voucher opportunity scholarship. The end goal is the same. We're still gonna touch those same students that you know really do need that assistance. I think when it came to the vouchers, it's a contentious issue. And I think you know there were many people who wanted it and many people who didn't, and I think we ended up with a good compromise that will at least help us start to help those students.
Right, now let's talk about parents. What input do they have with the organization first and foremost, and then getting involved in the school district both?
Sure, so I mentioned one of our 3 policy pillars is focused on empowering parents with meaningful data and options. So that's where we do talk about getting easily understood data out there to parents, but not only parents, also the general public who has a stake in an educational system. So some of our policies, one of our most notable ones, an anchor policy for us, is what we call A through F school grading. We have all of this rich data about our systems at the state level. We have PSSA achievement data, we have PVAS growth data, we have AYP, you know, data focused on the federal level. But unless you're in the business, you probably don't know what all of these various acronyms mean. And so what we want to do is we want to get that information, you know, in a one-stop shop for parents, slap an A through F grade on that school so that we know very clearly how they're performing for their students. And so that's something that we will advocate for at the state level. So first you need to get that information out there for the parents. If you're going to give them options, like the Opportunity Scholarship does, or like our public charters or public cyber system provides for those options, parents need to be able to have the data in order to make an informed decision on behalf of their student.
What's the easiest way for you to get that information to the parents?
Well, we will be pushing this year for a policy change at the state level so that there is a state level website that's accessible for all parents and all of the public to get this information. And then local school districts can also disseminate all of that information. But since we mostly work at the state level to enact state level policies, that's where we'll be pushing for it.
Great. Let's stop right there. We'll come back with more For the Record. We're talking about education. You're watching For the Record on WHVL. Welcome back to For the Record. We're with Ashely DeMauro from Students First. Ashely, let's talk about education, how it's governed, and do you think it should be at the federal level or at the state level? Go.
Yeah. So you're talking to somebody who's spent my entire career working at the state level
Yes.
when it comes to educational policies, so I may be a little biased there. But I would say that our Pennsylvania state constitution requires us to provide for an efficient and effective educational system for the state. I think what we've seen from the federal government
Sure.
is more of a move towards accountability, and I think that that's something that's great.
Sure.
And if they can inspire all states to have a focus on accountability and move in that direction, then I think that that's positive. However, I do know, now working for a national organization, but solely focused in Pennsylvania
Sure.
myself, that states vary, greatly from state to state, and we're active at several states around us, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, but even though we're even neighbors,
Right.
our system needs different things.
Exactly
so these
right.
policies can take different shapes while still providing for the same kind of accountability, but just specific to that state's needs.
Sure. Now, when I was researching for today's show, I thought, when I initially read it, I thought this was an anti-teacher movement, which is not the case at all. And, we shared a little bit about teachers that made an impact on me years ago. And that's really what you're trying to promote here with the organization from top to bottom, correct?
Absolutely. So we want all students, we think that one of our belief statements as an organization is that all students deserve a great teacher. I mean, research time and time again tells us that the #1 factor in a child's education is that teacher standing in front of the classroom. So our goal overall is to just first identify your most effective teachers,
Sure.
Reward them, and that goes hand in hand with retaining them. I think this is not something that should be scary for teachers who are effective and who know that they're having an impact on their students. But we also know that not every teacher that's in the classroom might be cut out for that. And this also isn't to point out those teachers so that in a bad way, but it's to get them the professional development that they need to become the best teacher that they can possibly be. So that's where our policies start.
And assessing each teacher, I remember back in the old days, you sort of were tipped off by your teacher that, the principal was coming in today and we were going to do something a little bit different than normal. That's not really what this is about reassessing this.
No, I think we've gotten far more advanced when it comes to evaluations. I mean, we have a lot of data, a lot of rich data. Many states have started this a little bit in advance of us. However, with our newly enacted statute, I think you're going to see Pennsylvania become, a nationwide leader in evaluations. But we use multiple measures in Pennsylvania. We look at a student's impact on PSSA achievement. We also look at the growth. So we want teachers to be growing students at least a year's worth over a year. But we also look at multiple measures. We realize that assessments are not the only thing. So in Pennsylvania, we also have what we call elective data. So local school districts, who are very different across the Commonwealth, will be able to choose some of their own elective data to evaluate their teachers. And then, of course, we still have observation, which is necessary.
And you talked about the different school districts. There's been a push. I know Governor Rendell talked about trying to consolidate more school districts.
Right.
You would think he was blaspheming the way the school districts reacted. People like their own individual educational groups. So I think it's good that your group is pushing for individuality when it comes to assessing their teachers within that group.
While we have one standard kind of measure, we do like uniformity so that everybody is kind of held to the same standards.
Sure.
But how you get there, is very different from district to district.
Right, but it's also not teaching to the test, correct?
No.
No.
I always, what's funny is when I hear about teaching to the test, I always say our tests are aligned with our state academic standards. So those are the concepts that you should be teaching. I think what teachers are getting at is they don't feel like they have the time to be creative. So I think, you know, the local control gives them that ability to kind of, you know, determine what they need to teach their individual students.
Now, this changing the way teachers are paid, et cetera, is going to have to come from Harrisburg. Have you worked with many legislators that have stepped up to the plate and started to run this with this being their issue?
Sure. So, I mean, we had to change the evaluation system through statute. Actually, when it went through the House, it was unanimous, voted unanimously. So I think it's all about finding consensus for these policies. I think we can get there. The evaluation was the first step, and now that we have that foundational policy in place, we can start to talk about how we use that data about effective teaching to make personnel decisions. It's not easy. Progress will be incremental in this area, I'm sure. But we'll be pushing for it over the coming years, and I think that there's a growing appetite for it in Harrisburg.
And this isn't just for public or private, this is all kinds of schools, correct?
So actually, you know, what we're talking about here are public schools when we're talking about evaluations. Our organization's goal is first and foremost to improve public education. So we want to ensure that all students that are attending our public schools, whether that be a traditional public, a public charter, or a public cyber charter, which are all public schools in our Commonwealth, we want to ensure that all of those teachers are effective. We want to ensure that all of those schools are of high quality.
Wonderful. Let's direct people to the website.
Sure. So like I said, we have a grassroots movement. We want to get people involved. You can visit us at studentsfirst.org, sign up for our email updates, and get involved in the movement.
Ashely, thank you for being a part of the show today. This is a really good topic, and I think as things progress with the organization, we need to spend more time with it, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
You've been watching For the Record on WHVL. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.